Jake Haro is the dad now charged with murder alongside his wife, Rebecca. Their 7-month-old son, Emmanuel, is still missing, and law enforcement say he's dead. They didn't say anything in their brief court appearance this week as you look at this video from KTLA, but Jake is now speaking from jail.
Well, his interview was different from the one I did with Rebecca, in that Rebecca stuck with the account that she was a victim of a mugging, that baby Emmanuel was kidnapped. And Jake did not say that.
I just spoke to the reporter who met face-to-face in jail with Jake Haro. What Haro said about accusations he abused Emmanuel to death, and how Jake's story compares to Rebecca's story, who still seems to claim that she was attacked and the baby was kidnapped. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. I'll get to my conversation in just a moment with the reporter in Southern California who may be the only person who has spoken with both Jake and Rebecca Haro since their arrest nearly a week ago. The Haros are being held at separate facilities. This is video per KTLA of when they were in court this week in Riverside, California. Both parents are charged with murder and a felony charge for filing a false report in the disappearance of their 7-month-old son, Emmanuel. Yesterday, the Riverside County District Attorney said Emmanuel died of prolonged child abuse.
The filing in this case reflects our belief that baby Emmanuel was abused, a victim of child abuse over time, and that eventually, because of that abuse, he succumbed to those injuries. That's what we believe.
You'll hear what Jake Haro said in response to that in just a moment. There was also a report that came out yesterday that Jake Haro confessed to an undercover law enforcement officer in jail, confessed to killing his son, is what the report said. This is from the Uvalde Foundation for Kids. It's a national nonprofit that helped with the search for Emmanuel before law enforcement said that the parents were lying. News Nation also came out with a report saying that Jake Haro had confessed to killing his son. There were a lot of similarities in the reporting between News Nation and what the foundation was saying, but in the News Nation report, they said that Jake Haro admitted to this informant to rolling over in bed and killing Emmanuel that way before throwing his body out in the trash. At the start of the news conference yesterday, the Riverside DA said it was important for him to speak because the Haros were the ones who spoke first in this story. They went on TV back on August 14th. This is video per KABC.
Got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, "Hola," and that's all I remember.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
The Haros appeared to be a united front up until their arrest on Friday last week. This is video from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office of deputies taking the Haros into custody. But now there appears to be a shift in what each of them are saying since they've been in jail and separated. Brian Rokos spoke to Rebecca Haro on Sunday last week in jail. He works for Southern California News Group. He says that Rebecca told him that she was attacked in a parking lot in Yucaipa, California, and Emmanuel was abducted. The very same story she told in that local news interview and to law enforcement going back on the day she said that Emmanuel was kidnapped. It's important to note that law enforcement believe that Emmanuel died as early as on or around August 5th, which was roughly 10 days before the news report that Rebecca and Jake said, where Rebecca was allegedly attacked in that parking lot in Yucaipa. But on that same day that Brian Rokos talked to Rebecca Haro in jail, Jake Haro was out in a field with deputies who were searching for Emmanuel. This is an image per KABC. To this point, it is still unclear why Jake Haro was with deputies in that field about 22 minutes from his house, right off of a highway. Law enforcement said they did not find Emmanuel's remains that day, and they still do not have Emmanuel's remains right now. Jake Haro, though, is speaking from jail. He did an interview with that same reporter, Brian Rokos, the person who spoke to Rebecca Haro on Sunday. And I spoke to Brian about what Jake Haro told him a short time ago. Joining us now is reporter with Southern California News Group, Brian Rokos. You can read his work on pressenterprise.com, and he just spoke with Jake Haro in jail. Big interview get here, Brian. We really appreciate your time being with us
Sure thing.
on Law and Crime. Let's get into it. What did Jake Haro tell you in jail?
Well, his interview was different from the one I did with Rebecca, in that Rebecca stuck with the account that she was a victim of a mugging, that baby Emmanuel was kidnapped. And Jake did not say that. He didn't say there was a kidnapping. He didn't say there wasn't. All he said was that Vanessa was innocent. And I asked him directly, are you responsible for the disappearance of Emmanuel? And all he would say was, well, I can't really talk about it on the advice of my attorney. Uh, he was unaware that earlier in the day that Mike Hestron, the Riverside County District Attorney, had said they believed that Emmanuel died from ongoing abuse. And so I told Jake what the district attorney had said, and he said, that's not true at all. But what he didn't say was there some sort of short-term abuse? I asked him, was there an accident? I gave him, lots of avenues to go down, and he just wouldn't want to talk about that at all. So you wonder what is there?
Considering that he, the big question that you and everybody has is like, what happened to baby Emmanuel? And he agrees to this interview, and yet when you ask that question, you kind of get a non-answer, based off legal advice and all this. Why do you think he agreed to do the interview?
Well, he seemed to be a talker. He had points he wanted to make. And the way I approach these interviews is always, I'd like to tell your side of the story in our newspaper. And for a lot of people, that's just irresistible, especially when they feel like they've been wronged, or maybe sometimes they feel like they can say something that would be favorable to their situation. But what he really wanted to talk about in length was his 2023 uh, conviction, where he pled guilty to willful child cruelty. And I didn't put a lot in the article just because I wasn't going to be able to get the other side of the story. But he really dumped on his wife at the time, Vanessa, about her possible role in the very, very serious injuries to their daughter, Carolina, who is now permanently bedridden. Jake had said that he was bathing the baby, and she slipped through his fingers and hit her chest on the sink divider, and that at the time it did not appear she was injured. But then later that night, in the middle of the night, Vanessa woke him up and said, "Hey, there's something wrong with the baby," and he felt her sides, and he felt a crackling, and that was a description that was in court documents, and that was a description he gave me uh, yesterday. And he made various accusations about Vanessa, about her suitability as a mother, and about her, the way she was conducting herself that night. And he made it clear that he thought he was innocent. He made it clear that he wanted to take the case to trial, but that he felt like he got pressured to make a plea. And he thought the sentence of 180 days in work release, where you show up to the jail and then you're let go at night after picking up trash or whatever, and a suspended 4-year prison sentence was fair. In his words, uh, he said the judge thought he was innocent. Now, I plan to get the transcript from that hearing and find out exactly what was said.
Yeah, because yesterday the DA in Riverside County, I mean, in the news conference, very much the opposite opinion about how all that went down, and said that the judge had even said that Jake Haro got a break. And that, the incident happened in 2018, and then the case is done in 2023, which was an interesting timeline. When you spoke with Jake Haro in jail, what stood out to you about his body language?
He was sweating. He was wiping his face. Of course, he's in a jail and it's 100 degrees out there in Banning, so I don't know what sort of air conditioning he had in there. Uh, he didn't seem scared. He didn't seem worried. He seemed more about getting his point across about how he felt like the district attorney was and other investigators were making the assumption that just because he had the 2023 conviction that, oh, he must have killed baby Emmanuel. He feels like that they made that leap without evidence. And so that's what he's concerned about. But he wanted to talk very definitely.
Did he, even though he gives kind of the, well, and the advice of the lawyer, I can't really talk about this, talk about that. And then like sometimes for me in an interview, maybe you try to take, you go left and they say, not there. And then maybe, there's other little pieces you can try to peel away. Like, did he give any nugget whatsoever that stood out to you as far as what we've heard? He was on TV saying, please bring my son home. And then now he's in jail. Did he say anything that kind of stood out to you that kind of piece together what he might think happens, or no, obviously he knows what happened?
Yeah, obviously these are, he acknowledged that these are very serious charges. Uh, he acknowledged the people that have been calling for his hide, the people on social media. He really didn't offer much about, the search, resuming the search. We've gone back and forth. He was cooperating. He was not cooperating, depending on who you talk to. And he said he was fully cooperating. And and that dovetails to something that the San Bernardino, excuse me, the San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes said at the news conference that they had been receiving cooperation from suspects. So whether that included Jake Haro saying, I buried the baby out by the freeway, I don't know. Jake wouldn't address how he wound up with the investigators out in the Badlands there, as they're called on that brushy hillside. It seems like there's something there that he's not saying, and it's more than just, well, Emmanuel was kidnapped, but I can't jump that far ahead.
Yeah, because it's yesterday you have the big report comes out from News Nation, and then there's this nonprofit that had sent us a note, the Uvalde Foundation for Kids, which were involved in the search early, then they weren't. And then, both it seemed very similar that there was this jailhouse confession, they said. The informant, a Perkins informant, which I had never heard of, who, according to the report, they go in, they sit with Jake Haro. It's actually a law enforcement officer, and he spills it to him saying the report said that Jake had rolled over on Emmanuel. That's how he died. And then they put Emmanuel's body in the trash. Law enforcement has pushed back on that and said that that is just not true. Was there anything in your conversation with him and in covering this story that stood out to you when that first started to make headlines yesterday?
Yeah, I was unaware of those reports at the time I spoke uh, with Jake. But looking at the reports, one was that, supposedly that Jake had, they had killed Emmanuel and they put him in the trash. And the other one on that show from the same person was that Jake had buried Emmanuel out in a rural area. And the reporter on that said he double checked, triple checked with his sources, and he believed both accounts to be true. But the odd thing is, both can't be true. It has to be one or the other. And now law enforcement is saying neither of them are correct. So, it comes back to when people use unidentified sources for information, you really need to think hard about whether that's true. I mean, we at the Southern California News Group are very, very, very reluctant to use anonymous sources unless we know that the person is in a direct position to know, and it's something that we might be able to confirm uh, uh, later on. So, it's hard for people, as you've seen with all the vloggers and bloggers and
Mhm.
amateur online sleuths and so forth, putting forward their own theories about what's happening, and private people trying to organize search parties. It's very difficult for the public to be patient and wait for law enforcement to do their job and to get to the bottom of the things, which they eventually will. So it's just they want answers right away. They want them right now, and then they start making stuff up when they don't get the immediate answers they want. And when we hear from law enforcement about what they say happened, there's still going to be people who won't believe it, that it's probably too facts are probably going to be too boring for them, and some fancy theory is going to be a little bit more exciting and believable for them. So we try to be we try to be as responsible as we can on these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I know I appreciate that, just being, not in California, and you're trying to figure, I mean, this story is played out on social media. I mean, as we've talked, so in so many ways that a lot of stories haven't in the past. It was interesting that Jake said that Rebecca was innocent, that he's like standing by his wife, and yet their stories are somewhat different. What did he say about his wife?
He said that she's a beautiful woman and would never hurt a child, and she loved her children. And that's what Rebecca said about Jake. Great father, great husband, would never hurt his kids. Um, and right now, obviously, the district attorney's office is saying something completely different. When Jake said Rebecca is innocent, that sort of said to me that he had some information, that he knew what happened with Emmanuel, and that perhaps she had no part of what actually happened, but he was not willing to say what really did happen. So, but again, he did not go back to the kidnapping claim, which he easily could have.
What do you make of and they're the only ones who know, right? And but you are one of, if you're probably the only person who's spoken to both of them since that first TV interview that they did, where she's making, sticking to the storyline that she gave, that this assault happened that police say didn't, and then he seems like he, like, to your point, has like some information. Like, what do you make of the differences in their stories and what they told you?
Well, uh, for one thing, this tells me that the sheriff's department has done its job and has kept the Haros from each other. Uh, they they're in different jails. Uh, when they were in court the other day, Rebecca was seated in the jury box on the far right side of the room, and Jake was seated in a chair near the where the inmates come in and out, those who are in custody, on the far side of the room. And Jake said, they've been told not to talk with each other. So very definitely, uh, they have not been in communication since the arrests uh, to make their stories align if in fact they're guilty. They obviously had a story to begin with about the kidnapping that they were sticking to, but now it seems like that's not quite the party line for both of them uh, anymore.
Did anything stick out to you, when they entered court, assuming that I mean, that's the first time they've seen each other since their arrest, and to, like, about just how they looked at each other, or any of the interactions they had?
Yeah, I didn't really, and boy, this hearing was like 3 minutes, so there wasn't a lot of time for things like that. I mean, they are instructed. You do not signal, look at, smile, wink, nod, anything like that to any other person. Uh, and they were let out separately. So I don't think that I didn't see them acknowledging each other. Uh, Rebecca was on kind of like on the side of the room, and Chris, or excuse me, Jake was more toward the back of the room, so they were not looking directly at each other. It would be kind of like this. And now Jake did tell me, and it's in the story. There'll be more detail in the story that's online. Is that they after they were let out of the courtroom, they went down elevators separately. They wound up sort of near each other in the holding area, and he tried to shout out to her, "I love you." And according to Jake, a deputy threw him to the floor like a rag doll. And I asked the sheriff's department if they would want to comment on the account, and they declined to do so. So obviously, sheriff's department taking it very seriously, trying to keep them apart. And so it'll be interesting to see going forward whether the attorneys, they're going to have separate attorneys, whether the attorneys work in concert or whether one side or the other turns against the other.
Did Jake say whether, I remember he had an attorney he did a couple of interviews and he was the same attorney from the 2023 conviction. Is he still his attorney or
He's
does
not
Jake,
his attorney for the
yeah,
criminal case.
okay.
The
Is,
Riverside County Public Defender's Office is representing both of them. And because the Public Defender's Office is like a law firm can't represent two clients in the same case. So the public defender's office, one of them will represent one of them, and then there'll be a court-appointed attorney from the private sector uh, for the other. And as of this morning, I don't know who's going to have who as their attorney.
and then just my last question I just thought about, and this was something from the news conference yesterday, is when the district attorney was asked if he knew where Emmanuel's body was, his answer, and I'm probably not quoting it directly, was like they have a pretty good idea of where it is. They don't
Mhm.
know. He was clear though in saying, I don't like, I'm not saying I know where it is, but I have a pretty good idea where it is. What do you make of that?
That means that, I mean, a couple of logical possibilities are that Jake said, well, I buried the body or I threw the body out off the side of the freeway and I'm not sure where. I would think that if you buried the body, that would be a pretty memorable event and that he would be able to point to an exact location. That's just kind of a guess. Another possibility is that they do have his phone, so I'm sure that they've been pinging the cell phone records to triangulate his movements, and it's possible that they have a general area where in that rural area it might indicate that he was in that general area for maybe an hour or something like that on a particular date when there's absolutely no reason for anyone to stop in that area unless your car breaks down. So that's why they could have a general idea of where it was. And we are not aware of any other location where the investigators have searched. I mean, of course, they don't necessarily tell us that. This search the other day came to light because people were calling up and saying, "Hey, there's to the media, hey, there's 12 cop cars pulled over by the side of the road out on Highway 60, and and there's a guy in a red jail jumpsuit out there." So you can't, they couldn't exactly deny what was going on.
Michael Hestrin, a lot of national attention on him now, and he's been the DA since 2014. What do you expect from him in prosecuting this case?
Well, he actually personally came out of his office to prosecute a bodiless murder case last year, and he won that. He had the advantage of incriminating text messages and surveillance images, and so he was able to win that case, I think, pretty easily. There was very little jury deliberation on that, as I recall. What evidence he has in this case, I don't know. We're waiting for a declaration written to obtain an arrest warrant to be published so that we can see what evidence he has in the case. But it seems like he might have less to work with. But I think that given that this is a national story, I don't know that Mike Hestron is going to be holding daily news conferences or anything like that. But he's he's assigned an assistant district attorney, a very, very high level prosecutor to this case. So he's going to do everything he can to win it, to leave nothing to chance, to make sure that there's a conviction. And I mean, let's face it, he is an elected official. He is a politician. Uh, there's been some instances in the past where he's punted on prosecuting people, sending cases to the grand jury. In high-profile case, there was a high-profile case where an off-duty LAPD officer shot a nonverbal man and his parents in a Costco after the nonverbal man slugged him, and Mike delivered that to the grand jury, even though he could have filed charges against the officer himself. And there was some considerable grumbling at that point about was he punting the case to the grand jury so he wouldn't have to risk losing endorsements from police unions by prosecuting a police officer. So, but this one seems pretty straightforward. It seems politically risk-free. It could only benefit him from an aggressive prosecution, and judging by who he is assigned to the case, that's what it looked like it's going to happen.
Right. No, and that was just like an interesting part where it was some information and like a big development, but it wasn't directly, we know, and that's kind of the possibilities that have been put around. It's just, fascinating case, so sad, I think is the biggest part of it is just where is Emmanuel and what happened to him. Brian Rokos, reporter with the Southern California News Group. You can read his interview with Jake Haro as well as his interview with Rebecca Haro at pressenterprise.com. Thank you for giving us your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Both Jake and Rebecca Haro are due in court next on September 4th. That is Thursday next week. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.